Okay, hey everybody, welcome. I'm Matt. If you see me in the hall at lunch, you can feel free to call me Matt, Matthew, Matteo, Schutte. That's how we pronounce my last name. I'm mostly going to be talking about tech today, but when I'm not working on technology, I spend a fair bit of my time surfing. This is one of the waves that I paddled into during my 15 years of surfing Mavericks, a big wave spot in Northern California. Without ever having surfed, you can look at that and think, no. Or if you speak Spanish, no quiero. Gracias, pero no. Right? I don't want. No, thank you. There have been a lot of photos of surfers like me on waves like this published over the years. This is the moment that gets shared and liked and spread around. It goes viral. And I get why. This looks dramatic. But the real drama actually took place about 30 seconds before this. The real moment is when a lump of water passes under you and reveals a monster of a wave rearing towards the sky and marching your way. This is the key moment. This is the moment when I find out whether or not I have the courage to make myself vulnerable. To try. In that moment, I have a split second to either one, sprint like mad toward the horizon and safety, and trust me, even after a decade or more of doing this, your body is telling you, choose door number one. At times, it's the right choice. I'm too far inside. The only option is to try and escape. But at other times, it's possible, not easy, but possible, to opt for door number two. Hold my ground, turn around, and paddle as hard as I can as the mountain of water rears up behind me. After that decision is made, there's no hitting pause. Either I'm riding, or I'm falling, or I'm having the wave land on me, or I'm underwater trying to stay calm, hoping that I reach the surface before I pass out and drown. Once I make the choice, the die is cast, and I'm just along for the ride, whatever the result. But for some reason, when I'm turning to paddle into a wave like this, I'm not thinking about the jerk that cut me off on the highway, or the parking ticket that I still need to pay, or any of that stuff. All the background noise, the ADHD, the minor worries of buzzing thoughts, it all quiets down. And I'm just trying to make it down this wave. For that brief bit of time, I'm entirely immersed in the present. In that moment, I'm in that state of mind that the Greeks described as ekstasis, or ecstasy. Me and the other mostly grown men and women that surf waves like this do it because it's ridiculously fun. Losing oneself in the moment like this is honestly, truly enjoyable. It's totally addictive. But of course, paddling into giant waves isn't the only way to access that feeling. I'm also able to completely lose myself when studying nature and trying to apply the lessons that I learn from natural living systems to the problem of designing communication tools to support a healthier, more thriving society. One time this guy said to me, "Aren't we trying to get away from nature? Who wants to live in nature? There's snakes there." In some ways, he's right. Nature can be ruthless, but as a result, the patterns that it has stumbled onto are incredibly elegant. To me, it's kind of simple, actually. Am I going to dream up some solution on my own, or am I going to choose to pay attention to the world around me and borrow from the solutions that have been generated and refined through billions of years of relentless transcontextual research? Nature's patterns aren't simple, but they balance a number of different tensions in astonishingly beautiful ways. Efficiency, and resilience. How do you get efficiency? Well, you do less of the stuff that's not working in this context and more of the stuff that is working. How do you get resilience? You make sure you have lots of stuff, lots of diversity, so that if the context shifts, something survives, something makes it through. So one of them is an elimination of diversity. The other is about a generation of diversity. When I dive into the details of how these things show up all around us in the natural world, I lose myself in that experience every bit as much as I do when I'm turning around to paddle for a wave at Mavericks. A few years ago, some friends and I applied some of the insights that we had learned in our various dances with and studies of nature and co-founded a project called Holochain. This came out of an all-volunteer effort to redesign the computing stack based on biologically inspired patterns that started way back in 2007, right? That's before the Bitcoin white paper. But it wasn't until New Year's Eve of 2016, 2017 that we began working on the next piece of our roadmap, Holochain. But before diving into what Holochain is, I actually want to start with what it isn't. Despite the name, it's not a blockchain. Holochain, not a blockchain. Super confusing, I know. They both make use of hash chains. We are not making use of global consensus. How many of you work on or are familiar with projects that make use of global consensus? Right. That's the world that we're occupying here at the Web3 Summit mostly, right? But this is a little bit different. Second, Holochain is not a platform. There isn't one big Holochain. Unlike Ethereum or other blockchains, there isn't one big global Holochain network. Instead, it's just a pattern. Holochain is a way of building software applications that run using just the devices of the participants themselves. Each app operates as its own separate, encrypted, peer-to-peer network, running on each of those participants' devices, enforcing the rules of whatever social dance it was that they have chosen to do with one another, authoring, publishing, validating, storing, and serving content efficiently together as a community. That's true whether they've chosen to do an old school Twitter-like social dance with 140 character text messages, or something like Uber with ride shares and requests, or something like Google Docs with real-time collaborative document editing. All of this and much more is done without needing to rely on centralized servers or blockchains with their external incentives required, or the fees that go along with them. Why would somebody run a particular Holochain app? Well, usually it's because they want to participate in that application, right? They want to be in communication with those people in that way. Your device does a tiny bit of work that offsets your own use. Holochain's pretty efficient, so the burden tends to not be very significant. If we did something like Twitter, even if you had 150, 200, 300 million different users, and you had 100 copies of every tweet, old school Twitter, 140 character text messages, your burden over the course of a year for participating in that app would be about the same as storing one 20 megapixel photograph. You willing to have your device do that much work? To have a version of Twitter that doesn't have ads and surveillance and manipulation? Well, maybe, right? That's a pretty decent deal. Now, Twitter's a lightweight option. You do something more like high definition videos on YouTube, different burden, right? If you set up an app and distribute it amongst your family or your company, we might not even know that it exists, let alone have some way to charge you for it, right? We were a bunch of hippies. Look at this hair, okay? We were a bunch of hippies trying to change the world. This was an all-volunteer project for a decade. To be clear, I have no problems with tokenized protocols. Holochain doesn't happen to be one, but I don't have any problems with those, and we'll cover something in a moment where we've dove into that space as well. I'm grateful for the protocol development that has been funded as a result of token-based protocols, especially from organizations like the Filecoin Foundation and the Ethereum Foundation, right? There's a lot of good work, a lot of good research that's been funded. But of course, token-based protocols are not the only way to bring new communication tools into the world. A few months ago, I was asked to interview some of the internet old guard as part of the 50th anniversary celebration of a non-tokenized protocol called Transmission Control Protocol, right? TCP/IP. That included Vint Cerf, one of the two inventors of the internet of TCP/IP, and Whit Diffie, one of the two inventors of public key cryptography. Now, both of these non-tokenized protocols transformed the world in radical ways. Great. What's the point here? The point is there's a wide variety of ways to bring new protocols into the world. The Holochain team has drawn inspiration from how our natural living systems, like our bodies, or a forest, or a coral reef, tend to structure coordination. I've given plenty of talks on Holochain and about how Holochain apps are structured, and you're welcome to go to our website or watch videos online for more details on the how of Holochain. But today, I'll focus on some of our observations of how coordination works in natural living systems and how that has led us to some different design patterns than you might be familiar with from Web 2 or Web 3. In this room, we have a shared carrier of molecules, right? My body is made of molecules. The air is made of molecules. Your bodies are made of molecules. I'm able to vibrate my vocal cords and bump some of these air molecules, which bump their neighbors and bump, 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 bump. And when that bumping of air molecules hits your eardrum goes boom, boom. Your body literally changes shape. That form of information gets noticed by you when you experience transformation, right? This is key. Information is always in some form. We only notice information, we only experience it if we are transformed in some meaningful or noticeable way. I'm okay with sound. Not as good as I used to be. I'm okay with light. Again, not as good as it used to be. I'm terrible with radio waves. Right? There might be a radio station playing right now, but I couldn't tell you if they were playing classical music or classic rock. Okay? I want to do a more interesting example. The three of you here in the front, can I have you keep your eyes open? And then everybody else, I want you to close your eyes. Go ahead and close your eyes. Okay, on the count of three, the three people in the front, I want you to tell everybody else how many fingers I'm holding up. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, everybody, you can open your eyes. How many fingers was I holding up? Yeah, probably 5, right? They probably didn't collude all that effectively in that short window that they were given. A network involves some shared carrier, like the air molecules in this room or the light that was coming off of my fingertips, right? And an ability to receive or to generate a fluctuation on that carrier, right? The sound wave, the air molecules sound wave. I'm able to send some signal. We have to have some alignment between an ability to express a signal and an ability to receive a signal. We don't necessarily have to do both, but there has to be somebody able to express and somebody able to receive. There's some alignment around that grammar, around that ability to receive and express information of that form. Networks involve this. They've got a shared carrier and have some alignment around an expressive or receptive capacity, around a grammar. Whether that network is centralized, decentralized, or distributed, this is true. Centralized ones, everybody's got to talk to one party. Decentralized, there's multiple parties. Distributed, everybody can talk to everybody. Great. But there's that alignment. An ecosystem is more interesting. In an ecosystem, you have agents who are able to receive information in one form, like the light that came off of my fingers, right? It was able to hit their eyes, and then they are able to transform that into information in a different form. They spoke 5, right? Which made that information available to a whole different group of folks that didn't have access to that first carrier. That seems simple, but I think it's actually really profound, and it results in some very different design patterns. It enables this bridging between networks. It enables an interoperability that is not defined by some standards committee, right? There's no standards committee in the forest. There's no agreement amongst all the squirrels and all the oak trees. No, you have agents, participants, individuals who are able to receive information in one form, transform that, and express it in a different form. And it enables much richer sets of coordination. There may be stumbles, there may be failures, but there's an immense generative capacity as well, because every single agent is able to try something new, right? They're able to take a swipe without having to get everybody else to agree to go along with them. It's how the human social world works as well. If you want to get something done at the school, you don't open up an API call. You go talk to somebody who knows people at the school, right? An ecosystem is far more fluid and adaptable than even a network of networks. Both are valuable, but they have radically different abilities to adapt and thrive, especially when the surrounding context is changing rapidly. Another principle here, modularity and composability are key to adaptive capacity. If everything is one big monolith, attempts to try something new require the entire monolith to take a risk on that attempt. If instead we have individual portions of the system able to be reconfigured or try something out, hey, if it fails, it was those folks, those parties whose time got wasted, whose effort got wasted. Even if they die, the entire system doesn't necessarily collapse, right? But if there's something that proves fruitful, that success might propagate really widely. There's basically this imbalance between the ability for the cost to propagate versus the lessons. Are you guys familiar with how bees go off and they find pollen, they come back and do a little dance? Right? When they do that dance, other bees see, oh, there's pollen over that way. So successes end up very quickly being made use of by the entire colony, but the entire colony didn't have to take the risk to go explore altogether. If they did and they happened to fail, we lost the entire colony, right? That's catastrophic failure. What are some of the things that this adaptive capacity makes possible? Well, and how does Holochain make use of this? With Holochain, we actually have loosely coupled the front end and the back end. So Holochain is really about us coming into alignment about how we're going to be in communication with one another and creating the medium in which we're doing that. But the look and feel of that, that's up to you. You might want it to look differently than I do. And one of the things that we gain from that is an ability to have parties run multiple applications on the back end, but customize the front end so that it looks and feels the way they want. As a result, when we're doing something like this is a video conferencing app where we didn't actually build in text chat, but instead we allow people to install and run whatever text chat app they want as a group. And they can either link to that and run it alongside or maybe embed it within the other application. This goes beyond user-centric design, which is like, hey, you should pay attention to people when you're designing for them, and moves towards user-driven design, where the actual end users themselves are being able to cobble things together and make them work better for them. Why? Because they are the bridge between those different social spaces. Anything they can read out of one space, they can write into another, and vice versa. I think of this as being a little bit like the Copernican revolution, where when we shifted from thinking that the Earth was the center of the universe to the sun being the center of the universe, the math for predicting the motion of the planets went from this really complicated math to something far simpler, right? If we end up with an architecture that actually more closely matches how social reality works and how physical reality works, our ability to do coordination becomes much more powerful. If you want to play with some Holochain applications, you can scan this QR code. We've got an app called Moss. Moss is kind of like a browser for installing Holochain apps and running them in groups. So you can create a group, You can share that with others. You can join a group. And then we've got an app store. You can download a whole bunch of different applications and start playing with them together. And all of these end up running just on your own devices. There's no web servers. If you were running this app with your 3 friends, nobody else is going to see it. It's literally just the 3 of you running that. It's a good place to start. These are a few of the applications that folks are building and making use of at present. They include real-time collaborative document editing, like Google Docs, real-time collaborative spreadsheet editing, like Google Spreadsheets, video conferencing, sticky note and Kanban board applications, a tabletop games app, file sharing, threaded chat, an app for hosting unconferences, like a self-organized participatory event, and more. And all of that without any company in the middle, without having to buy cryptocurrency to start. You just install, create a password. You don't even need a username because you're running it on your own device. The apps are run entirely by the participants themselves, and they can be combined to enable even richer possibilities. In addition, this fall, Vola, a privacy and simplicity-oriented phone company based here in Germany, will be delivering the Vola Phone Quintus, the first mobile phone that will ship with native holochain applications, including an encrypted chat app and a recovery app. I believe that chat app is going to actually get made available more broadly to the world as a whole. So given all that, how are we supporting the development of holochain? Well, we're building a separate service offering called HoloHost. A number of years ago, we raised about $20 million in an ICO, pre-selling some of the currency of this system. HoloHost is a peer-to-peer web hosting marketplace. Basically, if you built a peer-to-peer alternative to Airbnb, you wouldn't want just early, geeky crypto people, tech adopters, to be able to book a room. You want anybody to be able to book a room. We're familiar with this whole adoption problem in the Web3 space, right? What did we do? We made it so that we could build a bridge back to the masses, so that anybody with a computer could go, hey, I'll serve a website or a mobile app to ordinary folks. And that way Matthew's grandpa can go to ourbnb.co. When that hits a Cloudflare service worker, it gets routed to the next person in the queue. Hey, that's my laptop. Great. Serve the homepage. Grandpa wants a place in Paris next weekend. Cool, that hits their device. They reach out on the back end and they pull the photos and the descriptions and the prices for rooms in Paris next weekend and serve that as a website or a mobile app page over HTTP. When they finish doing that, they bill automatically in accordance with the prices that they had prescribed in advance. And the owner of that application, pays them just like today they pay Amazon Web Services. When they pay them, they do so using a crypto accounting system that we invented called HoloFuel that can handle giant volumes of transactions and is efficient enough to handle microtransactions. We needed this more scalable and efficient architecture because it really doesn't make sense to spend 10 cents to send somebody 2 cents, right? That's not going to work. And unlike Apple or Uber or Airbnb, who often take something like 30% for creating a two-sided marketplace, our business model is we take a 1% transaction fee when people pay using HoloFuel. Sometimes people ask if web hosting is a good target for disruption. You could think of it this way. Amazon's one of the biggest companies on the planet. AWS, Amazon's web hosting business, is responsible for more of their profit than everything else the company does combined. It's about 60+% at this point. And what we're hoping to do is make use of all of the computers that are out there in the world and do to Amazon's cash cow what Uber did to taxis. Now, is that going to happen overnight? Probably not, right? But over the long haul, we think that it's hard to beat free or cheap. People have bought computers to use them. If they're able to make an extra $20 or $30 or $40 a month, that's tough for somebody else to compete with, especially on the low end. The money that we raised was helpful. The fact that it went up a whole bunch in value, thanks to the cryptocurrency world doing the weird things that it does, gave us the resources to build out not just HoloHost, but HoloChain more generally. And the big reveal here, for those of you who haven't been following us too closely, is we've recently announced that after years of development, HoloHost and HoloFuel are going to go live in the coming weeks. We've committed to launch by the end of September. Holohost is an interesting example of one other design pattern that our team has drawn upon. It goes something like this. Living systems are systems of flows. If you cut off my body from flows of air and water, I would suffocate before I starved, right? I stop being a living system. I become a corpse. So everything needs to eat. We call that part of the pattern get mine. Everything needs to eat, which can kind of be like a bummer. You know, a little bit of a Darwinian war of all against all sort of vibe there. But there's another pattern at play as well. When an organism eats, it transforms resources in some way. And if it transforms them in ways that make life easier for other organisms, who in turn make life easier for them, you end up with this positive feedback loop. And those sets of usually unintentionally collaborating organisms that are doing complementary sets of transformations, they end up outcompeting everybody else in the space. Holofuel is unusual. It's not a token-based system. It's a mutual credit currency. The total balance of the system is always zero. So in order for one account to go up, another needs to go down. Soon after we launch the network, as folks start swapping hot our ERC20 token for Holofuel, there will be a bunch of accounts with relatively small positive balances and one really big negative balance. That's us. Why? Because people found us credible. They gave us $20 million. We're trying to make that visible in the accounting. Monetary supply in a mutual credit system is managed by controlling credit limits. And as hosts demonstrate an ability and build credibility by providing hosting, they begin to gain a credit limit and can start to go into the negative. That basically acts as an ability to print money to a small extent. And it ends up having a stabilizing effect on the value of Holofuel. It's not a stable coin. It's not pegged to a dollar. It's a dynamically stabilizing currency. Paying someone, this is the last thing I'll share on this, paying someone requires them to choose to accept payment. You can't just send somebody money without them wanting it. While those two parties are engaged in that transaction, everyone else is still free to transact in parallel. This is partly why we don't really have an upper bound on the transactions per second. It's because transactions are happening in parallel. So at present, the current moment might feel like this. There's a big opportunity on offer for us, and we're turning around, putting our heads down, and paddling. I'd be happy to connect. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Telegram by scanning one of the QR codes, or you can go ahead and book a call with me on Calendly. I'll be around the next couple of days as well, so you can also just ping me in the hallways. I'm looking forward to the explorations to come. Thank you.